Alphonse Capone was a monster. He was a very hardened criminal. I went through more investigations than Alphonse Capone, and now I'm talking to you as president. Can you believe this? I must tell you, a lot of trophy wives. Doesn't work out. They subjected the armed forces to all manner of social projects and political causes while leaving our borders undefended and depleting our arsenals to fight other countries' wars. The job of the U.S. Armed Forces is not to host drag shows. We will not have men playing in women's sports, if that's okay.
Another graduation day turned awkward campaign rally. Donald Trump this morning at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, rambling about drag queens, Al Capone, and for some reason, trophy wives. I mean,
it's always projection with them. It is always projection with them. I always feel like everything.
Are you calling his ex-wives trophy wives, Eamon?
Listen, I'm not going to talk about the first lady, but I always think that whenever I'm not even talking about the ex-wives. I thought you were going to ask me about the first lady.
The wife?
Yeah. I do feel that a lot of the things that Donald Trump talks about, a lot of things that Republicans do are projection. So when they talk about, oh, I survived more investigations than Al Capone, it's probably because in his head he internalizes himself as a criminal, and so he thinks like I've survived what Al Capone as a mob boss, and I've survived what Al Capone has survived. And again, like as you said, it's like, or alluded to, it's shameful that at a military institution, at a time when students are graduating, about to serve our country and go into the front lines, they want their spirits uplifted, they want a recommitted sense of purpose in what they're doing. The president standing with his promotional, political, Make America Great Again hat, talking about trophy wives and his personal investigations and pretending that he's some kind of martyr. Here I am standing in front of you, making it all about him, I think is so disrespectful and insulting.
Well, to be fair, he also did talk about the military.
And drag shows.
And drag shows, but he talked about how these were the first graduates of the golden age of the military because they are liberated from DEI and diversity initiatives. But I do want to point out that when the Supreme Court made its ruling a couple of years ago saying that schools could no longer consider affirmative action, race, other things like that in admissions. You know where I'm going with this.
I do.
They specifically exempted the military service academies because there may be some national interest.
Yeah. There is no military, actually, without minorities signing up to take part. We would not have
But now it's a golden age.
But now it's the golden age, I guess. They've lost a couple hundred books. So, I mean, it's funny, but it's also quite frightening. I see it as part of the broader apparatus of, I mean, we were talking about this earlier with the firings at the National Security Council, like this new top down, like even the military, it's about like from his view at the top down, what you do for me and how you are part of my personal campaign, like literal campaign and sort of like ideological campaign.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been, the president's always the commander in chief, but on behalf of the country.
But I don't think, you know, the idea of having I think we're kind of like overlooking one important point in this, and that is the politicization of these events, right? And these events at the military are very important. And when you have a president who comes in here and politicizes it with a campaign slogan and a red hat that has alienated and you know, upsets a lot of people because of what it conjures up, standing in front of people in the military and wearing it and making it about him, it no longer becomes an institution that is simply for all Americans to protect all of our values despite political disagreements. It's how do I make this institution synonymous with what I am about? And I'm sure there are people in that military who are standing there like, this is not what is supposed to be happening here. You don't hear rounds of applauses and many of the punchlines that he normally gives. You don't hear the same kind of laughter.
Here at home, President Trump marked Memorial Day by paying tribute to fallen service members at Arlington National Cemetery. The president continued the tradition of placing a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. He was joined by Vice President J.D. Vance as well as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Both men served in the military. The president then gave an address honoring the great warriors who died in service to the nation, singling out several Gold Star families to tell their stories. But the president's speech at this otherwise solemn event also, of course, included some of his campaign-style rhetoric.
Those young men could never have known what their sacrifice would mean to us, but we certainly know what we owe to them. Their valor gave us the freest, greatest, and most noble republic ever to exist on the face of the earth. A republic that I am fixing after a long and hard 4 years. That was a hard 4 years we went through. Who would let that happen? People pouring through our borders unchecked. People doing things that are indescribable and not for today to discuss. But the republic that is now doing so very well, we're doing so very well right now, considering the circumstances, and will do record-setting better with time. We will do better than we've ever done as a nation, better than ever before. I promise you that.
Mind you, that's the most solemn day on the calendar at perhaps the most solemn place in our nation. Before his trip to Arlington National Cemetery, the president put up an all-caps social media screed attacking former President Biden and calling federal judges who have blocked his mass deportation efforts, quote, monsters who want our country to go to hell. Joining us now, we have co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jonathan Capehart. Jonathan's also the author of the new memoir titled Yet Here I Am, Lessons from a Black Man's Search for Home. And also with us, special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong Fast. Thank you so much for guys for being here. Jonathan, I'll start with you.
Jonathan.
This is sadly not surprising. It almost seems like a tradition, a very self-aware tradition, that on holidays, President Trump takes social media and puts out an all-caps message to the haters and the losers, as he sometimes explicitly says.
Right.
And this time, though, to even go to Arlington and to in such a solemn day, such an important place, a place that I urge everyone to visit at some point in their lives, and to make these sort of campaign-style attacks, not a surprise,
right.
But still disheartening.
Right. Not a surprise. Definitely disheartening. But this is something he has been doing since he was president the first time. Remember, I think it was just after inauguration in 2017, he went to the headquarters of the CIA, stood in front of the wall of the fallen, no one knows who they are, the stars, and gave a campaign-style speech. And folks were aghast. And here we are, years later, and he's, as you said, at Arlington National Cemetery, a place where there shouldn't be politics. The people in those graves, they were Democrats, they were Republicans, they were independents. Maybe they weren't part of a party at all. Maybe they joined the service in service of their country and gave their lives as a result of it. Politics should have no place there. And yet the president of the United States, this president of the United States, can't seem to help himself.
There is still underway several hundred Russian and Ukraine prisoners that are currently being swapped here over the course of this weekend. But there are no official talks on the books. Russia had suggested that potentially there could be negotiations at the Vatican, but they said that they would not agree to that as a venue. Keith Kellogg, the special envoy to Russia and Ukraine for this White House, suggested the talks could take place in Geneva instead. But so far, Putin has not agreed to meet face-to-face with Zelensky. And this comes after 4 days of more than 100 missile strikes inside of Ukraine. In a social media post just in the last few minutes, President Trump again calling out explicitly President Putin, saying that he doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. In that post, threatening the president of Russia, though with unspecified whether that would be sanctions or further military cooperation between the U.S. and Ukraine, but acknowledging in that social media post, notably, Chris, that the U.S. could have made the circumstances for Russia much more difficult over the last months. I will note that 3 months ago, I had a conversation with a senior administration official at this White House who had suggested that a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine was just 1 or 2 months away. We are now 1 month past that. So still, there are a lot of questions about whether Russia is really willing to cooperate and bring this war to an end. Chris.
Well, Mark, obviously, Donald Trump has been increasingly public about his frustration with Putin and the lack of progress on a peace deal, although saying really bad things could happen is another level. Europe hasn't been waiting on Washington. Last week, the EU announced the new sanctions on Russia. Germany just lifted all range restrictions on the weapons it gives Ukraine. In your view, what is this relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and what's Trump getting at now?
Well, Chris, it's kind of ironic because in the last Truth Social post, Donald Trump almost admits to having helped Russia previously. It's quite remarkable saying that, well, bad things could happen. Well, bad things should have been happening, such as sanctions, such as weapons flows to the Ukrainians, and they have not. And really, the world is watching to see if Donald Trump is ever going to get tough with Putin, something that he's not seemingly wanted to do previously. There's a sanctions package sitting in the Senate that apparently is veto-proof that would put 500% tariffs on countries that essentially trade in Russian oil and gas. There's also the possibility of more weapon shipments. We could allow the Europeans to transfer kind of U.S. kit to the Ukrainians. We could actually sell weapons to the Ukrainians as well. But all of this is just right now just a little bit tougher talk from Trump, but he hasn't done anything yet. And one of the things, Chris, I think we should understand is there's a lot of GOP angst over this. There are hawks within the Republican Party. Do they really want to be complicit in what is happening now, this inaction and watching Ukraine just getting pounded day after day?
And The Economist, Mark, is reporting.
What we're seeing here is why so many people in the military, so many former people have given up on this idea that they need to be silent around Trump, have given up on this idea that they have to support Trump as if he's a normal president. And this includes some rank and file people, some former veterans who weren't necessarily high-ranking military officials and lead veterans organizations, right? And their voices matter, as well as retired generals, retired, colonels, high-level officials who have a lot of experience running the military. So whether it's veterans in veterans groups saying, this is bad for rank and file soldiers, or people who lead armies, they don't like what they're seeing. And it's because, one, Trump is fundamentally trying to politicize the military. And look, the U.S. military's always been political, right? It's always been political, guys. Like, the United States has launched coups against foreign governments, and sometimes they do it through like the CIA only, and they support like rebels and whatnot. But the U.S. Army has literally invaded countries because the country has tried to tax the American corporations there. So the U.S. Army is very political, but it's not strictly political domestically. Right? And there have been times where the U.S. military domestically has probably been more progressive than general society. For example, the U.S. military integrated racially before a lot of other parts of society did. Right? You had more civil rights in the military as, say, an African American at some points in history than you did in a school. So it's not a simple thing domestically. But Trump is very clearly trying to make the military an outlet for the Republican Party, and specifically his MAGA version of the GOP. And that's bad. It's bad because, one, it's wrong, and two, it corrodes the military's ability to be supported by the people if they believe that. And that's what Trump's doing.